Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Deb Rivera.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar event. We sincerely appreciate you joining us. Today, we will be exploring the refreshed design of the Microdata Access Tool available through data.census.gov. My name is Deb Rivera, and I will be your host for today's event. I want to start by thanking my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me and helping to support our speaker, and also for making this webinar possible. I will be handing things off to our presenter in just a moment, but I do want to go over some housekeeping items before I do. We would like to encourage participants to use the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation. To submit questions, make sure to use the All Panelists option from the drop-down menu. That way, all of our panelists can see your question. I will be using the chat panel to send you all helpful information, which includes instructions, URLs, and contact information. So again, for questions, please use the Q&A panel and make sure to use the All Panelists option to submit your questions, and look to the chat panel to find links and other helpful information. At the end of the webinar today, we will take your questions through the WebEx audio line. For this portion, we will ask participants to use the raise hand icon in WebEx to indicate that you have a question, at which time you will be allowed to come off mute to ask your question. Just remember, when you hear your name called, you will need to unmute yourself so we can hear you. Now, a quick note on the Q&A session. Today, we will focus on the platform data.census.gov/MDAT. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on other census products, the data collection process, disclosure avoidance, or methodology. Now, as always, we are recording the webinar today, and all of the materials for the training will be available through the Census Academy website. So thank you again for joining us. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Sam Patton. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you so much, Deb, for that introduction, and thank you everyone again for joining us today. Today we are going to be looking at exploring our refreshed Census Bureau Microdata Access Tool, or as you'll hear me refer to it many times throughout the webinar today, MDAT. So if you hear the word MDAT, just know that I'm referring to that Microdata Access Tool. So my name is Sam Patton. I am a part of the Center for Enterprise Dissemination's Dissemination Outreach branch. Again, thank you all so much for joining, and I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And just to give you an overview of what we're going to cover in the webinar today, the primary purpose of this is to cover some of the updates to our refreshed MDAT that was released just a couple of days ago on December 17th, 2024. If you'd like to review the full release notes for that December 17th release, you can do so at the release notes link that I provided here on the slide. There's some other updates we released to the site, data.census.gov, such as our new charts feature. I'm not going to cover those today, but I encourage you all to check out those release notes to see some of the other changes we've made to the site. So what we're going to actually cover in the webinar today is I will do a really brief overview of what microdata is and what it looks like when we're accessing it through MDAT. But most of the time, I'm going to be spending today looking at the new updates to the refreshed MDAT, and then we'll go into some examples and demonstrations on how we can view these new updates over on the refreshed MDAT. And then following our examples and demonstration, we'll close out with a Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, you can enter those to the Q&A panel. And any that don't get answered by any of our colleagues here as we go through this, we'll answer towards the end of the webinar, and we can also unmute your connected audio towards the end if you would prefer to ask your question verbally. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started with just a really brief overview of what microdata is. So when we're looking at accessing data through MDAT, the Microdata Access Tool, we're looking at accessing public use microdata. So what exactly is public use microdata? Well, it's anonymized data from individual responses. So when you're looking at these individual responses, they do have to be tabulated and weighted by the user. But the great thing about MDAT is that it does a lot of that work for you already. So when we're looking at accessing this public use microdata, there's a couple different places you can go to get it. You can access it through our API or application programming interface. You can get it through our FTP sites through a download, or you can get it through what we're going to be looking at today, our Microdata Access Tool, MDAT. And many of you are probably familiar with accessing data through data.census.gov, so I wanted to cover some of the differences through the data that you might see on data.census.gov versus what you might see on the Microdata Access Tool, some of the differences, some of the pros and cons to each. So when we're looking at accessing data through data.census.gov, this is coming through what's called our internal file. And what we do with this internal file is create pre-tabulated tables and then populate them over on data.census.gov. So the good thing about this is that it allows you to access data with more geographic detail, meaning that you can get down to those really small geographies like census tracts, block groups, and blocks. And the data is actually also going to be considered more precise because it's coming from that internal file. One of the disadvantages, though, that you might find is that it has less topic detail, meaning if you're trying to cross a lot of topics together, you might not find exactly what you need from one of those pre-tabulated tables over on data.census.gov. So what we have instead is from our public use file, data that's populated on the Microdata Access Tool. So using the Microdata Access Tool, or MDAT, you're able to create custom tables using your own variables so you can cross a lot of different topics together. So you can get much more topic detail from tables that perhaps you could not find over on data.census.gov. You can go ahead and create your own custom tables on MDAT. One of the disadvantages, though, that you'll find is that there's less geographic detail than you might find on data.census.gov, meaning that you can't get down to some of those smaller geographies like those census tracts, block groups, and blocks. And I'll cover what geographies are actually available in MDAT in just a moment here. So here is an overview of the surveys that are available in MDAT. We have the American Community Survey, or ACS, the Current Population Survey, or CPS, and then the Survey of Income and Program Participation, or SIP. So if you would like this full list, as well as all of the vintages or years that are available for each one of these surveys on MDAT, you can find that provided here at the link at the bottom left of the slide. And a moment ago, I mentioned that there were some restrictions with the geographies that you're looking at through MDAT. So these are the relevant geographies available for each of those surveys that I just mentioned. So focusing on something like the American Community Survey, or ACS, you'll see that the smallest geography you can go down to is what's called the PUMA level, or the Public Use Microdata Area. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you are coming to MDAT to create a custom table. Again, you're not going to be able to go down to those census tracts or block groups or blocks that maybe you would find over on data.census.gov. So with that brief overview of microdata, let's get into what some of the updates look like with this refreshed MDAT release. The first thing that you'll probably notice when you get over to MDAT is actually the URL has changed. So the previous URL was just data.census.gov/MDAT, and the updated URL, the only change here is we added an app in front of MDAT. So /app/MDAT will get you there following the data.census.gov URL. So if you type that in your browser, that's one way to get over directly to MDAT. Another way to get there is if you're on the data.census.gov homepage, you'll just click in the apps button in the top right corner of the screen. That will take you to our apps page, and then that will provide you a link over to MDAT there. So with these changes to the URL, it wasn't just the change to adding that /app into the actual URL. With these different changes, we also updated how some of the recodes are handled within the URL, how some of the variables and table titles are handled as well. So with this, we have this new feature on the homepage you'll see called URL migration. So we know that a lot of our MDAT users spend a lot of time creating really custom tables, putting a lot of effort into those, and then bookmark those tables to come back to them later on. So we know that there are users who have saved MDAT beta URLs that they've used in the past. And with this new refreshed MDAT, what you can do is take any of those bookmark URLs you've used previously. All you're going to do is paste them into the URL migration feature. And then when you hit go, it will update that MDAT beta URL that you had used previously, and everything will work just like you were using before with the refreshed MDAT. So we'll take a look at an example of how this URL migration feature works when I get to my demonstration. And when we're looking at this refreshed version of MDAT, it's not a completely new version, really. It's more of a kind of a design update, so to say. So many of the features and things that you've used before will be very familiar that you've used in the past. There are just some design changes that are going to provide a more consistent look and feel with the rest of data.census.gov. So all of the features and things that you've used in the beta version of MDAT are still there. They might just be in a couple different places that you click to get to, but you can still access all of the same things that you've done before in the beta version of MDAT. And just to cover a couple of the interface updates with this refreshed MDAT version here. One of the first things you'll probably notice is that geographies no longer are within their own tab. So previously on the beta MDAT, there was a geography tab in between the variables and cart tab towards the top of the page. Now you'll notice that there's a geographies button that you click into, whether that's on the variables tab or on the table tab. And from there, you can click and choose the geographies that you're interested for your specific survey. We also added a heavily requested feature of the select all geographies option when you're looking at these geographies. So you no longer have to go in and click individual geographies to select all of them. You can just click on that select all geographies option to select all the geographies that you're looking at. You'll also notice some changes to buttons, icons, names, and locations within the cart when you're editing your variables. So you'll see a couple different things here. One of the big things you'll notice is that you see this small pencil icon towards the right side of the screen there. That's where you go in to edit different recodes when you're creating recodes for your variables or editing your variables values. So you're still able to go in and do a lot of the same stuff that you were able to do in the beta version of MDAT. Again, it's just more of a design update than what you were using previously. And when you go and create an actual table, you'll notice a refreshed table layout. So what I want to do now is just walk through some of the updates to this refreshed table layout and how they work over on the site. The first thing you'll probably notice is that those variables, geographies, weights, and vintages are going to be able to be edited from the left side of your screen in a collapsible panel. So you can go through there, you can move your columns and rows around like you could before. You'll also notice you can actually edit your geographies there rather than having to go back to the variables. And then you can also select your vintages and things like that by scrolling up and down on this panel on the left. And then when you're done making any edits to your table using this panel on the left, you can collapse it to get a more full screen view of the table that you're looking at. We've also added this View Universe button, which is going to show you your list of geographies that you've selected. So in the beta version of MDAT, the geographies were listed out above the table. This is hopefully going to save some space on your screen there by condensing them into this View Universe option to where you can see them in a bulleted list format. And you'll also see any changes you've made to your variables, any restrictions you've made within this View Universe option as well. And lastly, if you would like to download or share your table, just click on that link at the bottom right of your screen. Here you can export the table, whether that's as an Excel or CSV file. You can download the raw data through the Download Raw Data button. And then if you click the Share button at the top there, that's going to take you to the link you can bookmark to come back to your table later on. And it's also going to provide you with those API queries. So that's a brief overview of the updates that are a part of this refreshed MDAT version. So now I want to walk through some of those changes with just a couple examples here and some demonstrations. So the first one I'm going to walk through here is using the recode, the poverty recode here. What I want to do is create an income to poverty ratio of 250% to 275% for all states in the US. And I always recommend when you're thinking about an idea to come on over to MDAT and create a custom table with, it's always actually a good idea to go first to data.census.gov to check for tables there. And there's a couple reasons why you might want to do that. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, the data tables on data.census.gov are coming from our internal files, so they can actually be considered more precise data. And the second reason is that these tables are already created for you over on data.census.gov. So MDAT, sometimes it involves a couple extra steps to create these custom recodes and these custom tables. So why go through the process of creating your own custom table if you already have the data available for you over on data.census.gov? But in this case, let's say I needed a very specific poverty ratio. Maybe I was writing a grant that needed that 250 to 275% poverty ratio. And when I went to data.census.gov, I found some tables that got me close to what I was looking for, but you'll notice neither one of these tables got me exactly that 250 to 275% poverty ratio that I was looking for. So in this case, since I couldn't find what I was looking for over on data.census.gov, let's go ahead and hop on over to MDAT and create a custom table with this poverty recode. So I'm going to go on over to my browser here, and I'm going to start just on the home page of data.census.gov. So just type data.census.gov into my browser and hit enter. And then when you get to the data.census.gov homepage, in the top right corner is where you will see that apps button. So I'm going to click on apps here. And then we have the option to go into microdata here. So I'm going to click on this microdata button here. So it's going to load up my microdata page here. You'll notice it added in the data set here. But again, if I just type in data.census.gov/app/MDAT in my browser and hit enter, that's another way to get over here if you don't want to go through the data.census.gov homepage. So on the refreshed microdata homepage here, you'll notice it looks very similar to before, where you start out by selecting your data set. So we can click into our data set here, choose between ACS1 or 5-year estimates. We have CPS data sets, and then our SIP data sets down below. I'm going to go ahead for this first example, just stick with the ACS 1-year estimates. And for my vintage, I'll go ahead and stick with the most recent 2023 1-year estimates. But you can see on MDAT, you can go all the way back to 2004 1-year estimates if you desire. So I'll leave these two as they're defaulted here on the home page, and then I'm just going to go ahead and click Next. And this is the refreshed version of the Variables tab, where we're able to search for our variables labels and our different variable names. So on this, I know this is probably a little bit small for you all, so I wanted to show you a way to enlarge the page. Rather than a typical way, I know a lot of people, when they get to pages that are too small, will use on their keyboard, for example, Control and plus to zoom things in. You'll notice here when I do that on MDAT, it kind of makes this bar have to scroll back and forth. So my preferred way for actually enlarging the text here on MDAT is going down to the accessibility options here. You can see we have different accessibilities options here, and we have one called content scaling. So if you scale the content this way, you'll notice I don't have to scroll back and forth when I'm looking at any of this stuff. So I'm hoping I'll leave it here for 120% for you all to make it a little bit larger. And here's where we'll search for our variables and our labels. In this case, I was looking for poverty data. Let's say I don't know exactly what the what the variable name was that I'm looking for. So under label is where I can go ahead and search for poverty. And when I search for poverty, I just get this one variable called POVPIP. Probably is what I'm looking for because the income to poverty ratio recode is the label here. But just to confirm, I always recommend opening up the values within the variable here. So this is one of the updates to the refreshed MDAT, is how to look at these values. Previously, there was an option over on the right that said details. Now I'll do it one more time just to show you how to open the values here. Is just clicking this small drop-down menu here. So looking at the values within this income to poverty ratio recode, I can see here there are some values between 0 and 500%. I was trying to create a value of 250 to 275%. So it looks like this variable should work for me. And I'm going to go ahead and check the box for it. And you'll notice we get this message. So this is another update with the refreshed MDAT. Previously, this message was displayed at the top of the screen. Now it shows you right in the center of the screen. Basically, what this is telling me is that this variable needs to be recoded for it to appear on the table. So if you don't know what that means, don't worry. We're going to walk through it here in just a second. It's quite easy to do. So I'll clear out this message here. And now I'm ready to select some geographies. So here, again, previously there was a geography tab at the top of the screen here. Now you'll notice this select geographies button here. And when I click on that, I can go on over to state, which is what I was looking for. I was going to select all states in the US. And again, you no longer have to individually check all of these boxes here. We now have this really handy select all option. So I can click that and it will select all the states for me here. You'll notice it does say 51 because District of Columbia is included on the states list here. Just a frequently asked question I get from people when they see that number 51 there. So that's why we're seeing 51 states. So with all of my states selected, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. You can see I still have my 51 states selected here under select geographies, and I'm ready to go ahead and move on to my cart here. So moving into my cart, this is the variable that I have to recode here. So in order to create a recode, I want to first make sure I have the variable selected. So that's done by default for me here because I only have one variable in this case, so it is selected for me, noted by it being highlighted in blue. And then to create the recode, we do what's called create a custom group here. So I can click into this, create custom group, and you'll notice it creates another variable here, that same variable name, underscore RC1, basically standing for recode in this case. So now at this point, what I want to do is edit the values here to create that 250 to 275% poverty level that I was looking for. So what I'm going to do first is just focus on this label here, because I noticed that it says this is going to be percentages between 0 and 500%. So if I want to edit these, what I can do is click on this small edit range icon on the right side, this little pencil here. This is something that might take some getting used to if you're coming from the beta version of MDAT, just knowing where to click to edit these variables. Again, it's going to be these small pencil icons over on the right side of your screen. So I'm going to click on that edit range option there and start editing my variables. So I eventually want to get up to 250 to 275, but let's create some other values first. So let's create a first value of 0 to 249% of the poverty level. So I can say 0 to 249 and click save. And then I'll name the group here that I have selected. We can just call it 0% to 249% poverty level. So I've got my first option selected here. And then when you've got everything ready to go, what you do is click Save Group. So I've got my first value selected on that's going to appear on my table later. Now I need to repeat that process for everything that is not elsewhere grouped here. So all of these other values that you see here, we're going to repeat that process for. So again, to edit those, on the right side of the screen, we're going to click that small pencil icon, or where it says not elsewhere grouped and it says edit group here. We'll click on that and we're going to repeat the process again. We can uncheck NA, uncheck 501% or more. And then for this value here, again, click on the pencil icon on the right side. And we can create that value we were looking for initially of 250 to 275%. Then we'll name this group 250% to 275% poverty level, so we know what we're looking at when we get to the table. And then we can go ahead and click Save Group here. Then we're just going to repeat that process just 2 more times. Again, on the Not Elsewhere group line, click on the pencil icon on the right. In this case, let's just uncheck NA. And since we've got basically what this is showing is from 276% and higher, because we have the 501% or more selected here. So I can rename this group 276% and higher poverty level. And I've got these 2 options selected here. So again, I can just save the group. And then one more time, you could be done in this case if you wanted to, but just to clean things up again in the not elsewhere grouped category for the last thing we have left, we've got this NA label. So just to clean things up on the table, I'll call that NA. And then save the group again. And so now we have all of those custom values that we created within our poverty recode here. And at this point, we're ready to go on over to our data table. So to do that, you can either click the View Table option down here in the bottom right corner, or you can click the Table option in the top here next to Cart. They're both going to take you to the same place. So when we get here, when you first see the table, all we're looking at right now are the states in the US, because we need to apply that poverty recode into either our rows or columns here. You can see on the left side of our screen, it says not on table. And there's that POV PIP underscore RC1, that recode that we just spent some time creating. So you could drag it to rows and maybe drag geographies to columns if you want. I think in this table, it's going to look best if I take the poverty recode and put it in my columns here. And so when I do that, give this table a second to load, and you'll notice we have our custom table that we created here. So before I go through and look at some of the information on the table here, I first wanted to highlight the information on this panel on the left side here. So we already looked at moving the columns and rows around. Again, if you wanted to swap these, you're more than welcome to. I think it looks best probably with the states in the rows here and the poverty information in the columns. So I'm going to leave that as is. As we scroll on down, you'll see here if you wanted to add or remove geographies, similar to how we did on the variables link, we could go back into states. And then if we wanted to uncheck a couple of states, we could remove those. The table will update. You see we're down to just 47 geographies now. And now we removed a couple of those first states in the list. We have our option to select cell value option here. And this is another thing I really like about the refreshed MDAT is that by default, most of the time, your cell value option is going to default over to count. Whereas on the beta version of MDAT, a lot of times it would default to the average of what you were looking at. And we found most of the time people who were using MDAT weren't typically looking at the averages. A lot of times people would always switch on over to count. So in this case, count is going to be the default here. And if you want to switch over to averages, of course, you still have the option to do so. Then we have our weights if you want to select your different weights here. And then down at the bottom, the last thing is your vintage or years. If you wanted to switch back between different vintages, that's going to be the last thing on this list here. And so if you've made all your selections using this panel on the left and you want a bit more full screen view of the data that you're looking at, you can click this small chevron icon here to collapse it. And then we get a more full screen view of the table we're looking at here. So this we can scroll up and down, and of course we can do things we could do before, such as sort from highest to lowest. If we were looking at 250 to 275%, if I click on that twice, you can see I have this small arrow here, and now it's sorting from highest to lowest for the states here. And then if I just click one more time, again, it will just return everything back to it was originally. So looking at a couple other things on the page here, I mentioned the View Universe option earlier on in the slides. Here's where you can see all of those selected geographies that you had chosen in this bulleted list format. So that's what we're seeing here in the View Universe. The other options we have are the download and share options here. So you can, again, export the table as a CSV or Excel, or download the raw data. And then if you're looking to bookmark this link later on, you can always copy that, bookmark it, and it will bring you back to this table. Or if you're looking for API queries, we have the API get and API tabulate queries here as well. So that's going to be all for this first demonstration here. And I'm going to go back on over to my slides to start working through my next example. So for my next example, another really popular use of MDAT we've seen was creating tables for single years of age. And a lot of this time, this was done using the auto group function, which is still here in the refreshed MDAT. So I wanted to walk through how the auto group function works in this refreshed MDAT. And to do this for the example I'm going to use, I'm going to look at single year of age by detailed Hispanic origin. So again, always a good idea before you create that MDAT table, check data.census.gov to see if the table already exists. So I went to data.census.gov. What I did was I just entered into the search bar single year of age, and it brought me back a list of relevant tables. You can see here I found these series of tables from the 2020 decennial census that had sex by single year of age, one of them for the Hispanic or Latino population, but it did not have it for detailed Hispanic origin, meaning I couldn't see the same information for the Mexican population, the Puerto Rican population, the Cuban population, etc. So what I'm going to do at this point, since I couldn't find the table I was looking for on data.census.gov, I'm going to go and create that custom table over on MDAT. So once again, let's go back over to our browser. And to reset everything here, I'm actually just going to go back to the data.census.gov homepage by clicking on the Census Bureau logo in the top left here. And once again, clicking on Apps in the top right. And then clicking on Microdata to get back to the MDAT homepage. So here, in this case, maybe I don't want to use the ACS 1-year estimates. Let's say I would prefer to use the 5-year estimates. So I'll click on the dataset dropdown here and switch on over to the ACS 5-year estimates. And you'll notice here for the vintage or year that the most recent release is for 2022. Now, our ACS data users are probably aware that we did release 2023 ACS 5-year estimates about a week ago on December 12th. That was for the 2023 5-year estimates aggregated data, which means it was the data that came over to data.census.gov. The ACS 5-year public use microdata sample or PUMS file for 2023 is actually going to release on January 23rd, 2025. So it's a little bit of a delay between that aggregated data and the PUMS data that you see here on MDAT. So on January 23rd, 2025, you'll see the 2023 data available here for the 5-year estimates. For now, though, I am going to stick with the 2022 vintage and click Next. And at this point, we're going to select two variables here. We were looking for an age variable, and we were looking for that detailed Hispanic origin variable. So here for age, rather than searching for a variable or a label, I wanted to show you another option you have, and that's right here, the filter by topic option. So here, if you click into the topics, you'll get a list of topics available from all of these variables. You can see there's a lot of information available, but let's start with age and sex, the first topic here at the top. And when I do that, it gives me just two variables to choose from. I'm probably looking for this AGEP variable, but just to make sure, let's again click on this small drop down here. And I can see, sure enough, it's giving me values from 1 to 99 years old. So I was looking for single year of age from 1 to 99. So this is exactly what I was looking for. So I'll go ahead and check the box here for this AGEP variable. Again, it's giving me that reminder that this variable is continuous. So again, what that means is I'm going to have to do a recode like I did previously. I'll go ahead and close out of this messaging now so we can select our detailed Hispanic origin variable. One thing I wanted to show you though is if you do use this filter by topic option here, just be careful if you're trying to add in multiple variables. As a reminder, it's just filtering into these two variables here. So at this point, if I try to search for Hispanic, nothing's showing up. And that's just because I am still filtered into the age and sex topic here. So if you want to get back to everything, just click and go back into all topics here. That will take you back to the full list of variables. And you'll also notice it didn't remove my age variable here. It's still up here in the data card. So under label, let's search for Hispanic. We get two variables that come up. And it looks like I want to use this second option here where it says HISP. And just to make sure, it does look like it has some of the values I was looking for, such as Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican. I can add those variables to my table here in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is check the box next to HISP. It adds it to my cart. You can see I have two variables in my cart now, and I'm ready to go to that cart, but I wanted to show you also, if you go into select geographies, and from here, I'm actually not going to select a geography because if you don't select anything, most of the time by default, it's going to default you to the United States. So in this case, I'm not going to check a region, division, or state here. I'm just going to leave it blank, and it's going to default to showing me data for the entire United States. So from here, I'm going to move on over to my data cart and get started first with this age variable here. So this was the variable that reminded me that I do have to create a recode for it. So what I'm going to do is click here to create a custom group for age, like we did before for the poverty variable. So I'll click on create custom group here. And actually what I like to do when I'm creating these single year of age variables is before going in and working on the 1 to 99 values here, I'm actually going to uncheck that and rename this group first. So I'll rename this under 1 year for those that are 1 year and under or 0 years old. I just like to do it first because I find it displays on the final table a little bit better when you do it first before recoding this variable rather than doing it later. So we'll rename this first one under 1 year and click on Save Group. So we've got that under 1 year value saved for later. Now, like we did before for the poverty variable within not elsewhere grouped, we see these values of 1 to 99, and I'm going to click on that small pencil icon on the far right side of my screen. And within here is where I'm going to create those single year of age values. So we could, if we wanted to, like we did with the poverty estimates, click on the edit range option and go one by one. We could go 1 to 1 for 1 year old. We could go 2 to 2. But of course, that's going to take a lot of time, so I'm not going to go through that process. That is helpful, though, if you wanted to create different brackets that perhaps you couldn't do with the auto group. But for me, the auto group feature here at the top is going to be exactly what I'm looking for. So when I click on auto group here, you can see it's basically doing that same thing there of clicking that pencil icon 99 times. It's just going to do it automatically for me. So it's going to start at those that are 1 year old and with those that are 99 years old and do it in groups of 1 here. You could, of course, change this if you wanted it in groups of 5, 1 to 5, 5 to 10. You could change it to 5. If you wanted 1 to 10, 10 to 20, you could do it in groups of 10. I wanted single year of age in this example, so I'm just going to leave everything as it is here. Start at 1, end at 99 in groups of 1. So when I do that and I click save, you can see it saves me a ton of time here by auto-populating all of the single year of age estimates here, from 1 all the way down to 99 there. So my age recode looks good here. Next, let's take a look at the detailed Hispanic origin variable. And in this case, we don't have to create any kind of recode. We actually don't have to do anything to this variable if we want to include all of the detailed Hispanic origins on the list here. But let's say I was interested in just including a couple of those on my final table. So what I could do to uncheck everything here is click the checkbox towards the top here next to label. It's going to remind me, this is basically just saying I have to select one variable for the data to display on the table. So I'll remove that message here and then just check a couple options for the first few that show up under detailed Hispanic origin. So in the end, this should look like 4 columns on my table that I've selected here, is basically what I'm doing in this case. At this point, my recode variable is ready to go, my Hispanic variable is ready to go, and I can go ahead and click on View Table in the bottom right corner. And it's going to default to displaying that Hispanic origin variable in rows. When I work with single years of age, I always find in MDAT it provides a cleaner look to have the age single years in the rows rather than the columns. So what I'm going to do is reorganize this table a little bit by 1, dragging the detailed Hispanic origin variable up to columns here. So now I have those displaying in my columns. And then where it says not on table, that age recode that I had created, I'll go ahead and drag that on up to rows. So before we take a look at the table, let's just double check everything on the left here. We've got our columns and rows. We didn't select a geography. So again, if you wanted to confirm that, click on View Universe. You can see it's telling me my geographies are default, in this case, the United States. And it's also providing those restrictions I placed within the detailed Hispanic origin variable there. We are looking at account for our cell value options. We're leaving our weight as person weight, and then we're leaving our vintage as the most recent 2022 5-year estimates. So at this point, we can go ahead and collapse the controls again to get a better look at our table. And then one thing, it's kind of hidden down here because of the increased screen size that I did for you all. But if we zoom back out, you can see we have the show totals here. So if we remove that, let me zoom back in, you'll notice that it removed that total column from the list. So again, I'll check it one more time to bring it back for the totals here, or you can remove it here to just have those detailed Hispanic origin options that I selected. And same thing as before, if we wanted to reorganize this table a little bit, we can click and drag the columns around to put them in the places we're interested in. We can make the columns smaller. If we had a lot of columns on the screen, sometimes they're going to scroll over and be too large, but in this case, we can make them smaller. And then similarly, if we wanted to sort from highest to lowest, we can just click on the values in the columns and then click again to remove them. So that is all I wanted to show for this second example here. Just wanted to do a quick walkthrough of using that auto group function. So with that, I'm going to hop back over to my slides really quick and go through a final demonstration here when we're looking at using that URL migration. So again, we know a lot of our MDAT beta users created custom tables in MDAT. Sometimes people spend a lot of time to create really custom tables and then bookmark those tables to come back to later on. So again, with the updated MDAT here, the refreshed MDAT, there were some changes to the URLs. And what you can do with those bookmarked URLs, though, is just paste them into the URL migration feature, and then it's going to update that URL for you to the refreshed version of MDAT. You're not going to have to do anything else. So you won't have to go and rebuild the table or anything like that. So let's take a look at an example where I have an beta MDAT URL that I bookmarked and created previously, and look what the URL migration feature looks like. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my browser and start on the data.census.gov homepage. And here, what I'm actually going to do first is copy the URL that I had previously. And let's say you just paste it into your address bar. You just open the bookmark like you normally do. So I've got this really long URL for a previous version of MDAT that I was using. I hit enter. It's taking me to the home page. It looks like it was loading for a second, but then the URL disappears and it just takes me to a blank home page here. So what you're going to want to do with that URL that you have bookmarked is copy it again. And then if you're on a larger screen, you probably won't have to scroll down, but if you're zoomed in like me, you'll probably have to scroll down a bit to see the URL migration feature here. All you're going to do is take that bookmarked URL you have and then paste it in to the URL migration feature here. And again, you can notice on this one, I am using this from the beta version of MDAT because there's no /app before the MDAT in the URL there. So I pasted in that older MDAT URL that I had used, and if I just hit go here, it's going to update and take me back to the exact same table that I had before. So what I did here was I created a language spoken at home by place of birth and ability to speak English table. I also named this table here. So I hadn't shown this previously, but if you click at the top of the screen, you can give your table a label or you can give it a name. This is really helpful if you are sharing links with your colleagues, because I know sometimes these MDAT tables can have a lot of information in them. So giving them a title can help other people you're sharing the table with know exactly what they're looking at. And you can see here, it saved all of my columns and rows placements. It saved my variables that I created. I created a recode for place of birth for those that were born in the United States or outside the United States. And then I had my language spoken at home variable over on the left here. So just also to show you a little bit more of the variables I created in the past so that it's saved and brought over to the refreshed MDAT. If I go into my cart, here's that ability to speak English variable that I had created. It remembered that I had previously unchecked the labels here. Here's that place of birth recode that I had created. I had gone through and selected all of these custom groupings for those that were born in the United States or outside the United States. And then for the language variable, I had just left it as is here. So I had done all of this previously. I had this table bookmarked, and once again, back over on the table, it saved all of that information here for me to look at and see. And again, I can sort things here from highest to lowest, drag things around if I would like. and then look at the different languages spoken, whether it's well, not well, or not at all. Again, just wanted to really quickly show this one example here of if you have one of those older MDAT tables, especially those of you who have spent a lot of time creating a custom table, just make sure you take advantage of that URL migration feature so you don't have to go through the process of creating your own custom table all over again. So that's going to be all for the demonstrations I had for you all. I'm going to go through a couple quick resources, and then we have some time here for some questions. So first thing I wanted to mention was our feedback email here. So please do, if you have any feedback, whether that's related to data.census.gov, the Census Bureau Data API, or of course, MDAT, this Microdata Access Tool that we've just been showing today. If you have any feedback related to any of those, please do send us an email over at census.data@census.gov. Many of the changes and improvements we make to our data tools are based on user feedback, especially this refreshed version of MDAT. Many of the changes were based on real user feedback, changes people wanted to see. So we do take those to heart and take those into account when we're looking at changing and updating our data tools. So again, if you think of anything you like, don't like, or especially if you run into any issues that perhaps something doesn't seem to be working properly, please do report this also over to our census.data@census.gov email. We always send those along to our developer team for their awareness. If you would like to receive email updates, you can do so at the link provided here. Just enter your email into the email box and check the boxes for what you're interested in receiving updates regarding. For example, if you check the box for data.census.gov updates, you'll get things such as our monthly data.census.gov newsletter. And also, if you would like some more hands-on practice, I highly encourage you to join one of our data.census.gov workshops. So these workshops, we have 5 of them split up into kind of 3 different sections. So 3 of them are related to data.census.gov. We have a basics workshop, an advanced workshop, and then a mapping workshop, all related to data.census.gov. Then we have a workshop specifically for the Census Bureau Data API. And then we also have a workshop specifically for this Microdata Access Tool. So we do these on a monthly or semi-monthly basis where we can do these workshops, and there are our most comprehensive courses for learning these tools here. So they're going to be 2 to 3 hours long, and they're going to have a lot of exercises for you to learn and walk through on these different tools. I'll also mention on the Microdata Access Tool workshop, we are updating that one as well. So if you joined previously, encourage you all to join again because it's going to be updated to more focus on this refreshed version of MDAT here. So check the link there for our upcoming January workshops. And so at this point, I am going to turn things on over to Deb to talk about our webinar evaluation and walk us through some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sam. So in just a few moments, we will begin our question and answer session. Today, we will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. So if you have a question that is related to today's content, we invite you to use the raise hand button just to indicate to us that you have a question. The raise hand button is located towards the bottom of your WebEx screen. So when we call your name, please unmute yourself to ask a question. But before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to invite you all to join us by providing your thoughts on today's webinar through a post-webinar survey evaluation form. And basically what that means is the evaluation survey will appear in a browser automatically when you exit the webinar. So if you have any notes for us to help improve these webinars, or if you have any ideas on other topics that you would like to see us cover in the future, please take a moment to fill out the survey. All right, so, and if you have any questions remaining after our session concludes today, or if you would simply prefer to email us your question, please feel free to reach out to any of the email inboxes that you see listed here. If you are a member of the media, you may contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. And for general data.census.gov, MDAT, or API questions from the public or for training requests, please feel free to reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. Okay, and with that, we can go ahead and see if we have any questions coming in through the line. I don't see any questions immediately, Sam. But while we wait for any hands to come up, I did see some questions that came in through the Q&A panel, Sam, and I think some of the answers might be helpful to others. So if it's okay with you, I will read some out loud for you.
Please do.
Okay, perfect. So our first question comes from Jason. He asks, is there a browser that MDAT works best with?
So our preferred browsers are going to be Chrome and Edge. I have had some success with Firefox as well in the past, but I would say if you're looking for the best experience, use Chrome or Edge. Those are going to be our preferred browsers.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Our next question comes from Grace. Grace wants to know, can you hide the NA or not elsewhere grouped so they do not appear on the table?
Hey, yeah, you absolutely can. So when I had clicked into those and I had renamed them as NA, you could, rather than clicking into those on the pencil icon and renaming them, you could actually just completely uncheck that label from appearing on the table. So similarly, when I was on the detailed Hispanic origin variable, where I unchecked a lot of those Hispanic origins that I didn't want to appear on the table, you could do that same thing with the NA value, is just uncheck it completely and it won't appear on the table.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Sam. Our next question comes from Inku, and they want to know, can you choose multiple years?
So you can't do multiple years at once within MDAT. When you're looking at it, you're going to have to go through each vintage. They're called vintages when you see them in MDAT, but you're looking at those years. You're going to have to go through year by year and select them one by one. You can always download that data and then combine them later in something like Excel if you would prefer. But unfortunately, no, you can't have multiple years appear within MDAT all on the same table within the actual browser tool.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. Our next question comes from Alex. When you are recoding a variable, is the first group saved always going to show at the top of the group list?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. It might be true because that is why I do it with the single year of age variable there, where I regroup and I save the under 1 year of age first. I would need to do some more testing to double check on that one. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. If you want to email us over at census.data@census.gov, we can do some more testing and get back with you on that one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Sam. Our next question is there a function in MDAT to compute margins of error on the results or confidence of intervals?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, but I believe the answer is no, that we cannot include, or we do not include margins of error within MDAT itself. I believe if you want to reach out, we can maybe put you in touch with, for example, our American Community Survey team, who has some guidance on computing those margins of error on your own. But unfortunately, no, you can't directly add those margins of error into the table.
Yeah, hi Sam. I can just confirm that is correct. And yeah, I can post the ACS user support email in the chat for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. If you need help with computing those margins of error on your own, the ACS team, they're a really great resource for helping out with those questions.
Okay, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Sam. All right, so it looks like the last question that we've received through the Q&A reads, is there a way to provide data, for example, Panama data on demographics? I'm not sure if we might need more clarification on that or if you just prefer to have them write us in. Sam, what's your take on this?
I would say probably write us in on that question. I'm wondering if that question might have came up when I was showing the place of birth variable, because within that variable, I believe you could select another country as one of the places of birth. So I'm not sure if that question was what they were referring to. But I would say go ahead and write us in with that question so we can get some more clarification and perhaps provide you a more clear answer.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. Okay, and it looks like that is the last of the questions that we have received. I did see a question asking to send the workshops link. I had sent that in the chat, but I'm more than happy to do that one more time. All right.
So just wanted to close out really quickly for you all with our resources that we have available. So here we have our resources page, our data.census.gov resources. This has information related to not just data.census.gov, of course, but you have access to API tutorials. You also have, of course, access to MDAT tutorials there. So there's helpful video walkthroughs, additional webinars, different PDF walkthroughs you can get to there that can help you stay updated with all of these different changes we have to our data platforms. And again, of course, any additional feedback or questions, please do send those over to census.data@census.gov. And the last slide I had for you all was just a really quick mention for our data dissemination specialist team. So this team is going to be local data dissemination specialists that we have spread throughout the country. There's probably a data dissemination specialist not too far from your area that's going to be able to help you out with finding and accessing data specific to your needs. So these data dissemination specialists, or DDS, are a really helpful group from the Census Bureau that works specifically with you, whether that's one-on-one in a training or through a larger training for your entire organization, that can provide you access to specific data that we have available here at the Census Bureau. So if you want access to training from a data dissemination specialist, you can contact them over at the email at the bottom right of the screen here, or you can call the number that you see there as well. And so with that being said, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining us here again today, and I'll go ahead to turn things over to Lisa to close us out.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.